Thank you for tuning in to the Unjiggered podcast. If you enjoy listening, please consider subscribing and giving us a rating on your podcast service of choice. Also, don't forget to like and tag us on Instagram at unjiggered_media. Thank you to everybody for listening, and now on with the show. You're listening to Unjiggered, a bartender podcast where we interview highly successful bartenders about their careers, lives, and the passion of bartending. This week on the podcast, we have Andy Loudon, head bartender of Tippling Club in Singapore. We chat about working in Socio Rehab in Manchester, 69 Colebrooke Row, Satan's Whiskers, as well as his iteration of Tippling Club. With this podcast, we want to peel back the mask and discover just how the greats really became the greats. So sit back and enjoy.
My name is Andy Loudon. I'm the head bartender at Tippling Club in Singapore, and also the group head bartender for the Spa Esprit group in Singapore. So I look after Tippling Club, which is our flagship venue, and then I look after 6 other venues in the company as well. But all the beverage programs and cocktail lists are managed by me. All the staff training is done by me as well.
Sounds like it's a lot of stuff to do, eh?
It's a lot, but it's fun. Like that's why we do it, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I'd rather be busy than quiet.
Cool. So we know that you work in Singapore right now, but you obviously don't sound like someone from Singapore.
Very true.
Where did your career start?
So originally I'm from a small town in Yorkshire, or North Lincolnshire in the UK, which is called Scunthorpe. Kind of grew up there, and that was where my first bar job was as well. So not a lot of people know this, but I worked for about 3 months in a place called the Blue Belt Inn, which was owned by the Wetherspoons Group.
Wow.
Yeah. Selling cheap pints and cheap food to a lot of locals.
You know, like I had a regular guest once who we were talking about flying, and he said that Ryanair is the Wetherspoons of the sky, which I think is an amazing comparison.
Absolutely true.
But you get a quite good spirit selection there, no? Usually in Wetherspoons. I mean, it's very reasonably priced.
Like, when I was working there, that's 16 years ago now. So
not so much.
I started then. So there in Scunthorpe, the spirit selection was not great. When I go back at Christmas every now and then, now I'm like, oh, I'll have that, and it's super cheap. But at the time when I was working there, it was Orange Reef, Blue Wicked, Smirnoff Ice, and stuff like that.
So how did that shape you? Like at the beginning, was it something that sort of like made you think, okay, there's more to this industry, or did it make you think, okay, this is not for me?
It made me want to never work in a bar again.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. When I left there, I went there for 3 months, like I said. So 3 days after my 18th birthday, I got the job there because I had a couple of friends working there, and then after 3 months, I was like, I never want to work in a bar again, so I quit. So.
And when did you actually get into bartending then?
So that will have been when I moved to Manchester for university. I was over there loving student life for the first few months, and then realizing after 3 months that I'd kind of ran out of all the student loan that I had for that quarter. So I needed to get a little bit of extra income. I came across a bar that was kind of my favourite bar in the area that I lived in, which was Didsbury in South Manchester. They had a place called A Pitcher and Piano, which is a national company in the UK. And that's where I started working. I went in, asked for a job. The guy behind the bar said that there was no positions available. So I went back in the next day and spoke to a girl that was behind the bar, and she said there was a position available.
Okay.
So it was just one of those things.
You're persistent. Such a charmer, man.
I was persistent, and I kept on going in. Yeah, and I ended up working for those guys for about 4 years.
Oh, that's such a long time. Yeah. How did that go for you? So you started as a bartender, am I right?
Started as a junior bartender, or originally just a barback, I guess. And I was only working weekends. And for the first probably 4 or 5 months, I was terrible. I was probably the worst bartender that I was lazy. I didn't know what was really going on. And then I feel as though I've become quite an aware person. And I think that helped me at the time, because I remember we had a staff meeting and no one's name was called out. No one pointed at me or anything like that. But they said a few things that I realized I was doing.
Really?
And I was like, I need to stop that and start working a little bit harder. But then 6 months later, after that staff meeting, I was the head bartender there.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I'd left university and decided to take up bartending as a full-time thing.
So what did you study at university, if I may ask?
So I did retail marketing and media studies.
Okay. And was that something that you liked, or?
It's something that I'm interested in. Media is certainly something that I'm interested in. Marketing is obviously a huge part of our industry at the moment as well. But one of the books I had to read at university was The Rise and Fall and Rise Again of Marks and Spencer's, which isn't the most enthralling and enticing subject in the world. So after when I started to take bartending a little bit more seriously, and when I realised that I was actually becoming quite good at it, I left university. My parents were fine with that because they knew I was very happy in what I was doing. The conversation wasn't particularly nice.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
But that's when I kind of started doing it full time.
What I think one of the good things about social media nowadays is that it's a bit more visual to convey the message that bartending is a career to your family. And so I think it makes it easier than when we started, probably.
I mean, 14 years ago, if it was 20 years, if I was 20 when I started doing it full time, nobody knew bartending as a full time career. Not a single person. Yeah,
exactly. And it was also like, I think, a second class to chefs. Like you have a chef that's like that's a serious career. Yeah. Bartending is it's a university job, right?
Yeah.
And so we're done with the pitcher and piano. What made you decide that you were ready for our next move?
So I started to learn more and more about cocktails during the last kind of year or so, 2 years or so at pitcher and piano. They sent me on a couple of courses. Then I had to go back to the bar and train a lot of the staff. And then I wanted to pursue it a little bit further. I really wanted to work in Socio Rehab. I applied for there, but my persistency didn't work out for that one. So I went to the next best thing. I went to someone who used to work at Socio Rehab, who is now, funnily enough, in Singapore. So Tim Barnes.
Oh, no way.
He was my manager, Harvey Nichols, and I worked there for a year. I think we worked together for about 10 months or so before he left, and that was when he was leaving Manchester and leaving the UK to spread his wings and venture out into this side of the world.
Such a small world.
Yeah.
I mean, our industry feels very, very small at times, doesn't it? Yeah, we all kind of all know each other, which is very cool.
Yeah.
And after that?
So Harvey Nichols. After spending about a year or so there, I moved over I finally got the position at Socio Rehab. So all my persistency managed to finally pay off.
Eventually paid back. So talk to us about Socio Rehab. What kind of bar is it?
So Socio it's still one of the venues that means the most to me in the world. So it's no longer open in Manchester anymore. But it is the venue that as soon as I walked in there, or as soon as most people walked in there, or the customers walked in there, it just instantly hit you with that cool factor. The doors on the outside there was a lot of graffiti, there was a lot of spray paint, it was a lot of kind of Banksy style stuff. On the inside it was a lot of kind of like plush leather sofas, lots of very cool artwork that the owner had collected as well. So Bo Myers was the owner, and he opened it up with a couple of other people, but he was the main guy that I worked for at the time. And it was very much a kind of like mid-2000s, 2010 kind of like disco cocktail bar. Like cocktails were only just really starting in Manchester at that time. They'd been around for 7 years when I started working there, and they'd been at the forefront of the industry in Manchester for that amount of time. And it was tongue in cheek, it was kitsch, it was disco, it was fun. It wasn't table service, it was all bar service. It was just a very, very cool bar.
And what kind of drinks did they make, and what did you learn from there, like drinks wise?
Drinks wise, it was kind of like the owner came up with all the drinks. We had a page of classics on there, I think, which was probably about 6 drinks. But then all of the drinks were kind of like, I wouldn't say disco inspired or tiki inspired or anything, but there was a whole mix of different kind of flavors and different kind of styles. So for me, what I learned there wasn't just about the drinks. It was a lot about customer service. It was round building, serving multiple customers all at one time, being efficient as possible. So when I worked there, I worked with a guy called Tom Vernon as well.
Oh, really?
Who was kind of took me under his wing a little bit when I started there, because I'd never worked in kind of that volume of a cocktail bar before as well. So not only was I working with Tom Vernon, I was working with Lyndon as well, because he was right next door in Kiko, and that's all the same kind of business. So it was more kind of like, it was the more organized way of starting to kind of bartend.
We had Tom on this podcast, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like one of our early episodes.
Oh, wow.
And how was it to work with Lyndon, like closely to him?
Again, like for me, like bartending is not just about the drinks you make. It's not just about the kind of venue. It's also about the characters and the personalities that you find within those bars as well. That's why a lot of people love going to certain bars all over the world. Lyndon was certainly a character.
He certainly still is, yeah.
I probably learned most of my jokes that I know from Lyndon.
Yeah.
And just the way to interact and the way to manage a room full of maybe 30 or 40 people you can fit in Kiko. The way to make everyone in that room laugh, the way to make kind of like the atmosphere when you've only got 2 people in there still great. That's what I kind of learned from those people as well.
He's such a mega guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he's awesome.
Cool. Then I think we're towards the end of your stint in Manchester at this point, aren't we?
Yeah.
So what made you decide that you were ready for a move?
I mean, Manchester was a great city, and I've not been back for a while, but I've still got a lot of friends there. But it was certainly time for me to kind of develop and look into taking it even more seriously. So I asked a few friends if they knew anyone that had any jobs or any vacancies in London. Bo, the owner of Socio Rehab, got in contact with a friend of his called Paul Mant, who used to run Quo Vadis and did a few other things in London. Now works out for a company in Australia. But he put me in contact with Marcus Delzanis, who was the operations manager for 6 Down Colebrooke Row in the drinks factory, which was ran by Tony Canigliaro. I sent him in my CV, and then he invited me down for a trial shift. So I took the train from Manchester, got my accommodation all sorted, went down to London.
I mean, you find your shoebox where to live,
basically. Found a hostel. I think I shared a room with my future housemate, actually.
Really?
Because he was moving down to London at the same time. We all kind of organised it together. So we stayed in a little hotel room, like single beds next to each other.
Yeah.
Not much space.
Hotel is a big word there.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a hotel. Hostel, maybe. And then I did the trial shift. I mean, Socio Rehab was no uniform. Wasn't really a uniform there. It was just nice shirt, jeans, and trainers. Wear what you want. Whereas 6 Down Colebrooke Row was like black trousers, white shirt, black tie, and then they gave you a jacket to wear as well. So I had to buy the white shirt, buy the black trousers, buy the black shoes.
Primark. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, bartending wasn't the moneymaker that it was.
No.
It's now. So I got all of those things together, and luckily they liked me on the trial shift, and invited me down to start with them. I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks later.
Okay. 16 Colebrooke Row is such an institution, and I loved the way that bartenders would interact with each other in order to make drinks as quickly as possible. Would you like to talk to us a little bit about how the whole thing was structured there?
Yeah, sure. So at 6 Down Colebrooke Row as well, just to give a little kind of like ambience about the actual venue. It's in Angel, Islington, which is a busy area in kind of like North London. But it doesn't feel like London at all. Like when I worked there for the first 3 months, I felt like I was somewhere in Milan in a little... I mean, that's the kind of style that Tony was looking for, and he pulled it off perfectly. Because it's all kind of red leather seatings, black and white tiles, brown furniture. There's a pianist that plays in there. It's very neo kind of noir film-esque as well. And behind the bar, it's very, very small. So you've got one station. You have 2 bartenders. There's 40 seats, I think we had in total, including the bar. You have 2 people working on the floor and 1 bar back. So 5 people in total. And with the one station, you had 12 drinks on the menu. So 6 drinks on that menu were split down the left-hand side on the pass, and 6 drinks on the right-hand side for the other bartender to make. And that was just on weekends. But the way, like you described, the interaction between the bartenders to make a simple round would be, if you've got crossover ingredients that go into, say, I'm calling out on the pass 3 drinks, all 3 drinks have lemon juice, but one of the drink is on the right-hand side, then I'll lemon juice all of the tins.
Oh, that's cool, yeah.
And then the other person will just carry on. If they're doing the, say, egg whites in 2 of the drinks, they'll do egg white for 2 of the drinks. So it just requires this really good kind of communication between the person you're working with on the bar. So whoever's on the pass is calling out the drinks as usual. And then you're just talking to each other about how you're making that entire round for the customer.
But the thing that shocked me, I noticed that by sitting at the bar, every time I went there, it's at some point it becomes such a polished experience that it's almost like there's no verbal communication. Yeah. It just everything seems so seamless. I don't know. Like,
no, it does get like that when you. I mean, there was kind of 2 or 3 people that I really enjoyed, had a really good connection with working behind the bar. So as soon as I'd called those drinks, we knew what each other were going to do straight away. So when it comes down, when you've worked with someone for maybe 3 or 4 months and you've kind of got that down, that patter down, and you call in the drinks and it's just flowing, customers would literally sit there and take photos and videos. And this is kind of, I suppose, at the start of Instagram and social media when I was working there. And, you know, that was kind of like a new thing. Now it happens all the time where people take photos in bars and videos of the bartenders and stuff like that. But back then it was kind of a new thing. And yeah, people would tip and people would love that experience because they would be enthralled by watching 2 bartenders make 6 drinks from the same ticket, but make all of those 6 drinks kind of together. It's super interesting.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely phenomenal to watch. And in terms of the drinks in that specific venue, what kind of drinks did you guys make, and how did you guys go about making the menu, putting the menu together?
So, I mean, the whole concept is kind of Tony C's concept, and 69 was always kind of like his, it was his first own bar that he had. So it was very much down the line of kind of like an Italian aperitif, digestive style drinks. But there was no menu concept, I would say. It was just 12 drinks listed on a menu, very old school, not even in a menu folder, just on one sheet of paper. And Tony's thought process, to the way he described it at the time, was always kind of like retro future, which is something that I still kind of work loosely with nowadays as well. So he'd take drinks from the past and then he'd reimagine them, add new ingredients, new techniques, and new processes into the making of that classic drink, but make it into a brand new drink. So it wasn't just changing 1 or 2 ingredients and then keeping the same name. It was something a little bit more than that. And he made fantastic drinks.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the relationship between the bar and the drinks factory? So let's talk about what's the drink factory before we actually go into this question. What was the drink factory?
So the drinks factory was kind of the head office and the laboratory of Tony C. and the drinks factory kind of company. So that's where a lot of the R&D and research was done for not only 69 Colebrooke Row, but the Zeta Townhouse, Termini, when that eventually opened as well, where a lot of the consultancies were kind of like spearheaded from. A lot of the staff trainings were done from. It was an amazing space, like a whole lab dedicated to R&D, and then books and different spirits and different things that bartenders could go in and learn about if they wanted to. There's a whole library there to read as well. It was a very welcoming environment. And, you know, every now and then, or 1 or 2 people from 69 Colebrooke Row would be in charge of lab days. So maybe, say, on a Monday through to kind of Thursday, 1 or 2 people from the 69 team, bartenders, would go over there and they prep the ingredients used at 69 Colebrooke Row on the bar for that week. So we'd do it like you do a general order for the week's par levels. You'd say kind of like 8 bottles of Flint vodka, 6 bottles of pink peppercorn and rose vodka and stuff like that. So it was a whole ordering process, and then people would go off to the lab, they'd make it, and then they'd bring it back.
And how long have you worked there for?
In 69, I worked there for 2.5 years. Yeah. I mean, it was an amazing experience. I learned an incredible amount.
Because it's such a cool bar. Very, very well known. You guys have for sure achieved your share amount of accolades while you were there.
Yeah.
But, you know, what was the breaking point, or what was the point that made you think, okay, now I need to sort of move on?
As well as, like, for me, bartending has always been a kind of like learning as many styles of bartending as I kind of can. You know, there's not one style of bartending, there's many different ones. So I'd kind of done the upmarket kind of Manchester one when I worked at Harvey Nichols. I'd done the disco style service, very kind of like up-tempo, high-energy venue within Socio Rehab. I'd done the kind of technical side at Colebrooke Row. While I was there as well, I was entering a lot of drinks competitions, and I was doing very well in them. So that's when I won a few competitions in London, regional ones, European ones, won the International Havana Grand Prix in 2014. And then I kind of decided that I wanted to learn a different side to bartending again. So completely kind of flip it on its head. Whereas Tony's kind of like this, and 69 Colebrooke Row was this kind of like amazing laboratory experience where you're playing with different ingredients and different processes and different machines. I wanted to strip it back completely bare and learn how to make drinks with just the products that are just available around me.
Okay.
Just on the bar. So no homemade ingredients. And And there was a bar that had just been opened by a couple of very influential bartenders in London who used to run the Match Bar Group and Milk and Honey.
Mm-hmm.
So Kevin Armstrong and Fraser Chapman had just opened a bar in Bethnal Green called Satan's Whiskers, and they offered me a position there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of to eventually kind of run the place, to run the venue. So at 69 Colebrooke Row, I was the assistant manager after, working there for kind of 6 months. Some changes were done within the company. The assistant manager before me got promoted to head bartender, and I was promoted to assistant head bartender.
Mm-hmm.
After kind of like the next 2 years of working there, I wanted to run my own venue, as most people do. So
of course,
it's kind of progression. It was also learning a different side to bartending as well, and that's why Satan's Whiskers appealed to me.
So Satan's Whisker was it is still quite popular because it's a fantastic place for bartenders to go and grab a drink, I think, as well as consumers. I think it's a very accessible bar, but can be quite geeky in terms of like, not as you said before, not about making your own ingredients, but using what's around you and like forgotten classics and things like that. So you guys had a very dynamic menu, am I correct?
Yeah, so the cocktail menu at Satan's Whiskers would be... The kind of theme of the venue was old school cocktails or classic cocktails and old school hip hop. So, one of those things you can just kind of like, you can remember it like that, and everyone knows that concept as soon as you say it, and everyone remembers it. The cocktail menu would have a kind of roughly 24 drinks on there every single day, and it would change every single day. So you had, those 24 drinks. You had kind of 3 or 4 that would maybe stay. You had a Satan's Martini and a Satan's Manhattan that would be on that menu every single day. But
so how do you make a Satan's Martini?
So it was the setup there.
If we're allowed to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So someone might shoot me, but they're not in Singapore. So the setup at Satan's Whiskers was incredible. It's the best bar setup I've ever worked with.
Okay.
The best designed bar that I've ever been behind. We had these huge Hoshizaki freezers where every single piece of glassware was in for the entire shift that you'd need. And then on the bottom shelf in those freezers, you had your spirits for every kind of stirred down drink that you would make. So your gin, your vodka, or your bourbon, rye, cognac, etc. Satan's Martini would be 60 mils of gin or vodka, and then kind of like 12.5 mils of dry vermouth. So we used Nolly Pratt there. That was the house. But it was when you're using a spirit that comes out of the freezer at minus 22 degrees, the starting point's lower. You can stir it down for longer. So whereas if you're using room temperature spirit, you can stir down a martini to about minus 2.5 degrees before it's ready. When you're stirring down frozen spirit, it takes a lot longer. Obviously, it doesn't freeze. Frozen spirit is just a term that's
straight from the freezer.
Yep. It'll take you longer to stir it down because the dilution doesn't happen as quick. And you can take that martini down to around kind of like we figured it out that anything after minus 7.5 degrees is a little bit too much chill. And it kind of stings the lips a little bit too much. So Satan's Martini was just a classic martini, but served super, super cold.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Fabulous. And and the rest of the menu?
And the rest of the menu would change. We'd mix up old school classic cocktails. Occasionally we'd make a few things in-house as well. There was certainly a lot of creativity there. Bartenders, we love to be creative.
Of course.
But the kind of whole theme of the menu was centered around classic cocktails. So you had 4 sections. You had kind of your sparkling style cocktails. Then you'd have your cocktail section, which were kind of straight up drinks. So anything served in a coupette or Nick and Nora style glass. Then you had your shorts, so something served in a rocks glass, and then you had your long cocktails as well. And between 4 and 6 drinks in each section.
I think that, you have a lot of bars that divide the drinks by either eras or by like spirits. But I think that distinction between short and long is such a cool thing to have on a menu, right?
It's easy for the customer that way as well. Like we like to overcomplicate things sometimes.
We do. And I think long and short gives you such a good idea about how does your drink look like. And it's sort of like you manage your level of thirst, right? You're very thirsty, you want something very long. Yeah, it's a cool way to do it. I think it's underrated way of doing it for sure.
I think, like I say, we like to overcomplicate things. I think people think that, the harder we make it to understand, the fancier it is. Whereas sometimes the simpler, the better. And that was the beauty of Satan's Whiskers as well, because it was very, very classical cocktails done very, very well. Very, very simple, kind of old school hip hop, but played in a very, very cool way in a very, very nice environment where everyone all the staff kind of had a little input into the playlist as well, which was very cool.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And that's the music that I grew up on as well. So it made it made it very special for me to be able to play that music there.
How long have you worked in Satan's for?
Again, it was just over 2.5 years that I ended up working there, and loved every single minute of it. It was a fantastic bar, I had a fantastic team, and it's such a great learning experience for me as well because, like I say, like Tony C and working at 69 Colebrooke Row was all about the equipment and the scientific process. Satan's Whiskers was all about the knowledge. So it was about the knowledge of kind of like what you have on that bar. So, you know, how you know where all of the ABVs that are just in your speed rail, all of the ABVs of the products that go from the vodka on your right-hand side to your gin, your triple sec, your rums, your bourbons, your cognac, your amaretto, your Aperol, your Campari, all of those ABVs, every single member of bar staff knew them. Every single member of bar staff also tried to know as much as they can with the back bar. So, and then all about the different processes to how to make these different spirits, the history of those classic cocktails as well. Because if you're a classic cocktail bar, and bartenders like to get geeky, if someone asks you where that drink is from, you need to be able to know.
Of course.
So everyone knew the revolving classics that we had, and anything new that was on there, we'd know the history and know the kind of perfect recipe for it straight away.
So about that, like I think there is a phase in bartending, right? Which we all go through, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it. It's called the Super Bartender phase. Yeah. It's like the day that you learn how to make a 50-50 Sazerac, all of a sudden you're a super bartender, and this entitles you to go in any bar and ask for anything, like mega weird no matter what, and be super snobby about the result, right? So we used to have a lot of super bartenders at the American bar, right? And then it was hilarious to see them when they would sit at the bar and talk to Eric, right? I had this guy once. He's like, "Oh, sorry, do you mind? Can I get a Bobby Burns?" And Eric's like, "Sure. Any preference on your whiskey?" And he's like, "Oh, do you have Jura Superstition?" And he's like, "No." "Oh, okay. I'll have a daiquiri then." And it's like
very, very different.
Yeah, hilarious. Cool.
Yeah. And like another thing about Satan's Whiskers, which is something that, I mean, it's a very old school mentality of not only the drinks, the service, the music, but it was also about how to build a round of drinks, which I don't think a lot of people touch on nowadays. So what drink goes out for, if you've got a round of 6, if you've got one ticket with 6 drinks, which order those drinks should go out in to hit the table at the best quality, because some drinks will start deteriorating straight away, some take 30 seconds or so. The idea there was to build the perfect round of drinks, and every bartender should be able to know that as well. Like, that was super interesting to kind of learn, and like I say, not a lot of people touch on it nowadays, but it was a very eye-opening thing for me.
What's the general rule of thumb in regards to this, like building a round of drinks? Like, what kind of drinks do you try to deliver first, and what would you deliver last? So what do you think deteriorates sooner than other drinks?
For me, in the way we kind of figured it out was that any kind of drink served in a flute would go out first. So you're trying to make all those drinks within kind of like a 30-second window.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So your kind of flute one would go first, and then anything served long over ice would be second, short over ice would be third, and then anything that's straight up would be last.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So we talked about Satan's quite in depth, I think. Was this your last experience in London?
Yeah. So from leaving there, I left London and left the UK.
How did that feel at the time?
I'd lived there for 5.5 years, and it was, I'd made some great friends, but it was certainly time for me to maybe leave. I love London; it's such a great city, but I wanted to see more of the world. Of
course. And what was your next step after that then?
So I went out to South America and spent 6 months traveling around there. So I actually flew from London to Cuba.
Fabulous.
Yeah, after winning the Havana Grand Prix in 2014, in 2016, they invited me back out to be a judge of the 2016 version of the competition. So I kind of used that as a moment to kind of move over to start traveling South America. So started in Cuba, did 10 days of work or so with Havana Club, and then stayed in Cuba for another 2 weeks on top of that, and then flew over to Bogota.
And then from there?
So I spent a month in Colombia.
Okay.
and then a month in Peru. So Colombia, Peru, Chile, Bolivia, and Brazil. And Brazil was when I got there, it was the end of when I got to Rio, it was the end of the Olympics in 2016.
Yeah.
So, which was an amazing experience as well. Brazil was, all of the countries that I traveled around were amazing, but the two that stood out for me were Colombia and Brazil.
Awesome. I've done so little of South America. I've only been to Brazil. No, sorry, I've only been to Argentina. So
right. Okay, well, I missed that out. So
yeah, there you go. So we complete each other. Did traveling across South America change the way you see the bar industry or the way you think about drinks? Or not really? It just gave you like a little bit more of a experience luggage so you can talk to guests better.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't really do that much drinking when I was out there. Like we went to a few bars, we had a few beers, we tried a few local things and local flavors and food. And I've always got a lot of inspiration for drinks from food and flavor combinations. So certainly from trying food, 100%, it did open my eyes to more ingredients and more things that are out there. In terms of drinking, didn't really try that much. Local beer was good. But I was also on a bit of a budget for it as well, so didn't want to spend too much money doing all that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. 6 months is such a long time. Sounds like a super cool trip.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And after that, how did you go about choosing the next place where to live?
We flew from Brazil back so Sylvia was from Milan. We flew back to Milan. We spent a month or so back in Milan, a couple of weeks back in the UK. And then we decided that we were going to head out to Australia. So we ended up flying from Milan to Melbourne.
And how was Melbourne for you? I love Melbourne. The food there is amazing.
Yep. Food, drinks, very, very good. Food's amazing. People are very friendly. Weather's good. Well, the weather's very different in the space of one day. It can change 4 different times in 4 different seasons, all in the space of 4 hours, almost, it seems. But yeah, it was a great experience, and it was a place where I started to work a little bit more as well. So I started working at a place called Bar Americano, and it was, working there was a great experience. It was very similar to something like Colebrooke Row or Bar Termini. So I was kind of mixing both Colebrooke Row and Satan's Whiskers in one, because it was that kind of style of place, but it was all classic cocktails. So we'd kind of like amalgamated. It almost seemed like he'd amalgamated both of the bars in London that I worked at into one venue.
So in terms of Bar Americano, is a very particular bar. First of all, because of the size, am I correct?
Yes.
So how big was it?
10 people. Legally, 10 people.
Legally, yeah. Did you ever go over the legal limit?
The most amount of people I had in there on like a Tuesday or a Thursday night, it was midweek because I was by myself, was 21 people.
Oh.
Yeah.
How did you have about 21 people by yourself?
Well, that was the amazing thing about that venue, and there's funnily where I learned so much about kind of hosting and being like I said about Lyndon earlier, being able to control a room and talk to people and make sure everyone's entertained. At Bar Americano, Monday through Thursday, there's only one member of staff. So if you get busy, you have to be able to deal with it. So your bartender, your waiter, your door staff, you're everyone.
You are effectively controlling the room, aren't you?
Yeah. So it was amazing. I used to have such a laugh there. I used to not shout out at people, but I'd have so many jokes with the Melbourne crew that were there, or the tourists that were coming in. Fantastic place to work. Learned a lot about service and about myself as someone who interacts with guests a lot more.
We talked about the spirit selection that you had at Satan's Whiskers, which was quite diverse, and you had a little bit of everything, and you were quite knowledgeable about it. In Bar Americano, if I'm not mistaken, it's the exact opposite. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how was the spirit list there, and how was it put together?
Okay, so the spirit list at Bar Americano was literally, there wasn't a list. You could write it down in literally categories, because that was all there was. There was just one variety of gin, one variety of rum. So that we had a light rum, you had a dark rum, one bourbon, one cognac. Then you had like the Italian style digestive. So you had Campari, you had a few different liqueurs, Aperol, and that was pretty much it. And nothing was in a branded bottle. So no customer would actually know what gin you were serving. So it was very clever in a way. It's something that kind of like the Operation Dagger kind of touched on here as well.
Indeed.
Serving stuff with no brand on it kind of like breaks down the barrier of advertising to a customer.
It makes it also difficult to sign brand contracts, I guess. But
but I mean, it wasn't really the kind of venue where he was going to do that. You know,
no, of course.
Matt is he's an amazing artist, and that venue was beautiful as well.
So okay, cool. How much time did you spend in Australia?
So 18 months in total. But really, it was more traveling for me than it was working. So in Australia as well, with the visa that I was on, I could only work in Melbourne or I could only work in one company for 6 months.
Okay.
After 6 months at Bar Americano, I ended up leaving and traveling up the East Coast.
That's cool. How was the travel there? Did you like it?
Yeah, it was. Again, it was a fantastic experience. And while I'm always keeping, like we said before about South America, and whether it changed my perceptions on and approaches to drinks, it's great to see another continent and another kind of batch of ingredients that I've never come across before. So lemon myrtle, every Australian gin in the world has got lemon myrtle.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was something that I'd never come across before. So yeah, you see different things, and you pick up different things, and you pick up different flavors. And the food and the produce there can be fantastic as well.
How did you choose your final stop for now, which is Singapore?
So after kind of a year and a half in Australia, I flew to Hong Kong to meet up with some friends over there, and I was thinking, well, where am I? I need to go back to work soon. I'm going to do a little bit of traveling. This is what I thought at the time. I'm going to do a little bit of traveling through Asia. It's either going to be Hong Kong, where I know a handful of people, or it's going to be Singapore, where I know a handful of people. And I got to Hong Kong and I met up with some friends, and we were there for 4 days in total. And we were out until 6 a.m. every morning. And I was like, well, I do not want to be here because I had too much of a good time. Hong Kong's amazing. It's a great city. But after I spent 6 months traveling through Asia. And when I first got to Singapore, the city struck me. So I felt at home. I felt like it was a very, it's super clean. It's a very green city as well. There's lots of parks. It's busy. It has a lot of first-class bars as well. I had friends here, but it felt like it was the right place. Mm-hmm. It felt like the right place.
How did you get the job at Tippling?
When I was traveling through Asia, I think I was in Thailand at the time, I started speaking to a few people out here, and I was like, oh, do you know of anything? And I was doing the same for people in Hong Kong as well. And I know Joe Schofield, the old head bartender at Tippling Club. I knew him through Manchester when he was there and when I was there, and then when he worked at the Zeta Townhouse, I was at 69 Colebrooke Row, so we kind of knew each other from that. So I was like, oh, do you know of anything? Do you want to meet up for a few beers when I get to Singapore? And he was like, yeah, sure, no problem. A few months down the line when I get here, he says he gets in contact on Facebook Messenger or whatever, and he's like, do you want to come out for a coffee? I'm like, sure, yeah, I've not seen Joe in a while. I'll grab a coffee with him. So I'm typical tourist, just finished my travels through Asia. So I'm in shorts and a vest and I'm walking around the streets of Singapore. And after 5 minutes of kind of like a little bit of small talk and seeing how we are, he's like, oh, so I'm kind of leaving Tippling Club. So if you want to apply for the position, I can put a good word in and we can go from there. And I was like, well, didn't expect to be kind of interviewed in the attire that I'm wearing. And then as we should all do, I said, oh, let me have a little think about it first. So played it cool. Went back. I was speaking to a few different people, and there's a few different things out there at the time. I did my research on Tippling Club. I did my research on Ryan, the owner and executive chef there. And then I said to Joe, I'd like to sit down and talk to Ryan if it was possible. And luckily, he was in Singapore at the time. So we went out. We sat down. We had a little bit of food. We had a couple of beers. We got to chatting. And Ryan's a very upfront, very straight talking, very personable guy as well. Mm-hmm. So after kind of like an hour or so of talking to him, I said I'd love to explore the opportunity. So they asked me to go in, both Ryan and Joe asked me to go into Tippling Club and make some drinks on the Saturday. So I went in, Ryan asked me to make 3 drinks, so I made him 5.
Classic.
And then, he offered me the job later that night. So
that's cool.
That's how it all happened.
So we talked about Tippling Club in the past. However, I think it'd be beneficial for us to talk about your iteration of Tippling Club. Yep. So why don't you talk to us about your current menu and the thought process behind it?
Yeah, sure. So The current menu is called A Guide to Modern Drinking, and it's all based around a very classical French cuisine, and in particular a very famous French chef who kind of started it all, whose name is Auguste Escoffier. So Escoffier was kind of like he's the kind of godfather of modern cooking, I would say. So he's a very big influence into the way that Ryan was kind of brought up in kitchens. And we wanted to do something that kind of like hadn't ever really been touched upon before. So, yeah, it was an incredible kind of like experience, kind of researching all of those things. I'm a history guy as well. Like I love history. Like one of my subjects at school was history. That was my favorite thing. So getting into kind of like the geeky side of bartending and all the history that goes with it was kind of like two and two things put together that I was bound to enjoy. And we wanted to stray away from kind of like the things that Tippling Club had been doing for the past couple of years, which was a sensorium thing, which was kind of like what Joe was known for. So I wanted to put my own kind of imprint onto Tippling Club. And we had some fun, man, with that menu. Like when you're taking food and you're kind of replicating it into the form of a cocktail, so what we did was we took Escoffier's first cookbook, which was called A Guide to Modern Cooking, which was released way back kind of like at the turn of the 20th century. And we took his most famous recipes in there, or famous people in his life, or famous events, and then we translated those stories into the form of a cocktail. So Escoffier was known as kind of like the chef, the king of chefs and the chef of kings, because he was the best chef out there at the time. And he used to he held a lot of dinners for very important kings all over the world. He was the executive chef at the Savoy Hotel. And then when he left the Savoy Hotel, he opened up the Ritz-Carlton with César Ritz. He was the executive chef for the first class cabin on the Titanic ship. He was the first kind of chef to he put the brigade system into place as well. So how we all know it works now, and kind of a bar is the same structure. You've got head bartender or head chef, sous chef, chef de partie, demi chef, etc., etc. He put that into place because he spent 7 years in the army before he opened his own restaurant, which was called the Golden Pheasant. So he got that structure from the army and then placed it into a kitchen as well. So yeah, an amazing experience, and there's some fantastic drinks on there, all centered around his life.
Would you like to talk to us about one of the menu highlights of one of the things that you are the proudest?
It's not just my menu, it's Tippling Club's menu, it's the team's menu. We all put a lot of work into that. The two drinks on there that I probably enjoy the most, the white truffles in winter. So white truffles in winter, it links back to Escoffier by it's the story of his life and his love for two women in his life as well. So he was in love with actress Sarah Bernhardt and poet Delphine Daffis, I think it was. And the book is all about his life. White truffles, I've always loved the flavour of truffles. I've always loved truffles in champagne and kind of like trying to put those things together. The flavours in the drink are Palo Cortado sherry, orange blossom, popcorn, champagne, and that's everything. And the kind of idea behind it is to make there's white truffle oil in there as well.
Yeah, of course.
The idea behind the drink is that it's meant to take a very basic champagne, a very non-vintage champagne, and make it taste like a vintage champagne. So the kind of like earthiness from the truffles kind of add that kind of like terroir-esque note to the champagne. The popcorn gives it a nice kind of almost caramel style note. The orange blossom comes through. Everything kind of works in conjunction, and then the Palo Cortado sherry is in there to kind of give it that bump and that little bit of more kind of like depth of flavor as well. It's one of my favorite drinks.
You make me want to smash one right now, actually. Cool.
And then the other one would be a drink called a bombe glacée, which is based on a dessert by Escoffier, for which he lists in A Guide to Modern Cooking. I think he lists about 70 different variations for what is in effect just ice cream wrapped in meringue.
Whoa.
But it's meant to look like a cannonball. It's meant to look like a cannonball, hence the name bombe glacée. But inside, it's a very long, refreshing tequila-based drink. With so we redistill the tequila with bee pollen. So you get kind of that honey-esque note to it. And then we make a syrup from vetiver, which is a fragrant grass that's native to India, fig leaf, and a little drop of vanilla essence in there as well. And then it's just lemon juice and topped with soda. Just shaken, refreshing, easy.
Super cool. I think that's pretty much it. So I think I will like to ask you a question we ask everyone. If you could choose your very last drink, what would that drink be?
Oh, so many choices. What would my very last drink be? A glass of champagne.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If it has to be a cocktail, I'd go with a Manhattan.
It doesn't have to be a cocktail. I think a glass of bubbles is a pretty solid
I think
last
that's a good
drink.
way to go out,
Yeah.
right?
Cool. Thank you so much. It was
my
awesome
pleasure.
to talk to you, man.
Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed our interview with Andy. We are Unjiggered_media on Instagram, and you can follow our personal accounts at mmadiotti89 for Michele, Alex J. Murphy for myself, and Adrian Besser for Adrian. Thank you for listening.